Entry 1, Initial Observation. I have worked in these halls for over 3 decades. I have seen the most fractured minds try to stitch themselves together through endless nights of confusion. I have seen men scream at walls and women sing lullabies to empty beds. But when Thomas Avery arrived, something in me felt a subtle shift I could not ignore. He came in under emergency court order, escorted by 2 deputies from the Lewis County Sheriff's Department. The incident report was clear and alarming. At 2:15 a.m., Avery entered a neighbor's home uninvited, armed with a kitchen knife. He was shouting that they needed to seal the attic before they came through. He injured no one, but the homeowners were terrified. Deputies found him standing in the hallway, knife lowered, head cocked as though listening. When they called to him, he dropped the blade without hesitation, but his eyes never moved from the ceiling corner of the room. At Stonewall Jackson Memorial Hospital, where he was first taken, toxicology screens showed no alcohol or drugs. His heart rate was elevated, but not dangerously so. He answered basic questions, his name, date of birth, and address, without confusion. But when asked about the incident, he whispered, "They were already in the walls. You don't hear them, but I do." The attending psychiatrist judged him an imminent danger to others and initiated an involuntary commitment. By evening, he was transported to us. When I met him in the intake area, he was seated calmly in a metal chair, his hands folded in his lap, his bare feet pale against the scuffed linoleum. The deputies lingered near the door, shifting uneasily. I introduced myself. "Mr. Avery, I'm Dr. Samuel Kerrigan. I'll be overseeing your care." His head turned slowly, his gaze meeting mine with an unsettling stillness. His eyes were dark, almost black in the dim light. Then, without breaking eye contact, he spoke softly, as though sharing a secret he had waited years to tell. "I knew you would bring me back here," he said. "They told me you would." The room felt colder. I glanced at the deputies, but neither reacted. They hadn't heard the weight in his words, or perhaps they chose to ignore it. I checked his chart. There was no history of psychiatric admission, no prior evaluations that connected him to this place. And yet, his tone was not one of confusion. It was certainty. We escorted him to Isolation Ward 3, a wing rarely used now, but still operational. The orderlies walked behind him, but Avery did not resist. As he passed through the narrow hallway, he kept looking at the upper corners where the ceiling met the walls, like he expected something to crawl out. Later that night, as I completed paperwork, I felt uneasy. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and through my office window, I could see the shadowed corridor beyond. These old walls hold decades of pain, patients long gone, records buried in archives. Yet something about the way Avery looked at me stayed in my mind like a thorn. Entry 2, Night Review. The first night after intake is often uneventful. Patients are sedated, observed, monitored. Avery, however, was placed without sedation at his own request. He spoke clearly, showed no aggression, and complied with instructions. I approved the request. At 1:05 a.m., while reviewing files at my desk, I heard a sound from the ward, 3 sharp knocks, evenly spaced. I assumed it was an orderly. When I stepped into the hall, it was empty. The ward was silent except for the hum of old radiators. I walked past the observation windows, checking each room. Most were empty. In room 3B, Avery sat cross-legged on his bed, eyes closed. His lips moved, forming words I could not hear through the thick glass. I opened the observation door quietly. "Mr. Avery?" His eyes opened slowly and he smiled faintly. "They're moving tonight," he said. I stepped inside, keeping my tone even. "Who is moving, Thomas?" "The ones you can't see in daylight," he whispered. "You've walked past them. You just don't know." He glanced at the corner of the room behind me. I turned. Nothing but cracked plaster and peeling paint. But I felt the hairs on my arms rise as if static charged the air. "Thomas," I said carefully, "why do you believe they're here?" "They've always been here," he replied, his voice calm, almost gentle. "You hear them in the pipes, in the walls. They whisper names of the ones they want. Sometimes they choose staff, sometimes patients. Tonight they're restless. They don't like that I speak to you." I noted his statements verbatim in my pocket journal. His effect was too controlled to be typical paranoia. His words carried a kind of internal logic, as if he believed every syllable. "I think we should let you rest," I said. "They don't rest," he answered. Entry 3, Personal Note. I am writing this in my private notebook rather than the official chart. There are things I cannot explain, things that would sound unprofessional if documented formally. As I left room 3B and began to walk back toward my office, I felt a sudden chill, though the heating system was functioning. The corridor seemed longer than before, as if the architecture itself had shifted. I stopped by the window to Isolation 3D, an unused cell that has been locked for years. Through the dirty glass, I saw a faint shape move in the dark, just a flicker, like someone stepping back from the window. I unlocked the door, turned on the light. The room was empty. Returning to my office, I passed the old staff bulletin board. On it hung faded notices, decades old. My eyes fell on a yellowed sheet listing former staff who had resigned. At the bottom of the list, barely legible, Dr. S. Kerrigan, 1974. I was not employed here in 1974. I was still in medical school, but there it was, my name typed on an ancient sheet, pinned to the board as though it had always been there. When I returned to my office, my hands were shaking. For the first time in years, I considered requesting to be taken off the overnight rotation. But something about Thomas Avery keeps me here. Something tells me I need to understand what he knows. I hear the pipes creak now, a low rhythmic tapping like knuckles against hollow metal. 3 knocks, a pause, 3 more. I will check on him again before dawn. I'm not sure I want to. Entry 4, second interview at 7:30 a.m. I returned to Isolation Ward 3 with my notebook and a cup of black coffee. The night staff reported no incidents, no disturbances. Thomas Avery had remained in his bed, speaking softly to himself at intervals, but never shouting, never resisting. He greeted me with the same calm expression as before. "You stayed," he said, as though it surprised him. "I told you I would be back," I replied. I sat in the metal chair near his bed, the same chair the night orderly used to observe patients. The walls of the room were dull gray, the paint blistered in long vertical strips. A single barred window let in the pale light of dawn. Thomas folded his hands. "They asked me if you would return." I said yes. I ignored the implication. "Thomas, you said something last night about voices in the pipes. How long have you heard them?" He looked up at the ceiling, eyes unfocused. "Since I was a boy, but they weren't strong then, only whispers in the crawl spaces. After I turned 30, they became louder. They follow certain buildings, old places, hospitals, schools, places where people hurt." He leaned forward slightly. "But this place, this one is alive. It breathes through the walls. Haven't you felt it yet?" I noted his effect. Calm, deliberate, eyes tracking me without hesitation. No sign of hallucination beyond the content of his speech. "Thomas, you understand these are not real voices. They're a symptom. Stress, trauma." He interrupted with a faint laugh. "You're lying to yourself. You've heard them too." I did not answer. I could not. Entry 5, review of historical records. Later that morning, I accessed the hospital archives. Most staff ignore these records. They are dusty boxes kept in a basement storage room that smells of mildew. I searched for prior mentions of patients describing similar experiences. I found a folder dated 1964. A patient named Carl Dupree admitted after breaking into a church bell tower, claiming that the ones in the walls were hunting him. Dupree died 3 months later of heart failure in his cell, though he was only 37. The notes from his attending physician described episodes of hearing knocking sounds in the night, believed by the patient to be non-human entities. I closed the folder. The handwriting was faded, but a line at the bottom caught my eye. Consulted Dr. S. Kerrigan regarding auditory phenomena. I froze. The same name again, decades before my time. Entry 6, afternoon observation. At 3:10 p.m., Thomas requested to speak with me again. I agreed. The orderlies escorted me to his room. He was sitting on the bed, humming a tune in a minor key, low and slow like an old nursery rhyme. "You found something," he said. "What do you mean?" "In the basement," he whispered. "You saw his name, the other Kerrigan, the one they took." My pulse quickened. "How could you know that?" "They showed me," he replied. "They show me things you haven't seen yet." I glanced at the observation window. The hallway outside was empty, but in the reflection, just for a second, I thought I saw a tall shadow standing directly behind me. When I turned, there was nothing. Entry 7, night disturbance. That night I chose to remain on duty again despite my growing unease. The corridors were silent except for the hum of old fluorescent lights. At 2:47 a.m., the alarms on Ward 3 triggered briefly. 3 beeps, then silence. I went to check the isolation rooms. Thomas was awake, standing in the center of his cell, eyes fixed on the door. "They're coming," he said softly. Not for me this time. I felt a sudden heaviness in my limbs, as though my body resisted moving forward. The corridor behind me seemed to stretch, the walls closing in. "Who's coming?" I asked. Thomas didn't blink. "You'll see them when the lights go out." As if on cue, the overhead lights flickered twice, then steadied. I stepped back, heart pounding, trying to keep my voice steady. "Thomas, stay on the bed. Don't move." "They're already moving," he whispered. Entry 8, personal note. I returned to my office, but my hands would not stop shaking. I poured coffee, let it go cold on the desk. I kept hearing faint tapping in the ventilation ducts. 3 knocks. A pause. 3 more. The record of Dr. S. Kerrigan from decades ago lies open beside me. His handwriting is almost identical to mine. His final note reads, "Do not listen when they call your name." The hallway outside my door is silent. I will check on Thomas again before dawn. I am not sure I want to open that door. Entry 9, Dawn Encounter. The hour before dawn is when the hospital feels most alive. The air seems thicker, the shadows heavier. I force myself to walk the corridor back to Isolation Ward 3. My shoes echoed on the old tile, each step a sharp sound in the stillness. Thomas was seated on his bed, staring at the window as pale morning light leaked through the bars. His expression was calm, almost serene, but his lips moved as if in prayer. "They were here," he said when I entered. "Who, Thomas?" "They stood by your door," he murmured. "You didn't open it." I moved closer, notebook ready, though my hand trembled. "Thomas, why are they here?" "To remind you," he said. "They take what's forgotten. They eat memories. They eat names. They don't like when you write things down." He smiled faintly. "That's why they took the other one, the other Kerrigan." My throat tightened. "What do you mean, took him?" Thomas's eyes flicked to the corner of the ceiling again, and for a moment his smile widened into something unnerving. He wrote too much. He started telling others. And then he stopped moving. Entry 10, Physical Manifestation. Later that morning, while reviewing medications in the nurse's station, I heard a loud metallic clang from the far end of the hall. 2 orderlies and I hurried to investigate. One of the locked storage rooms stood open, though no one had the key except administration. Inside, the shelves were overturned, supplies scattered across the floor. On the wall above the shelves, scratched deep into the paint, were words in uneven letters. "Stop writing Kerrigan." No cameras in that part of the ward. No explanation how the door was opened. I ordered the orderlies to clean it and say nothing. Entry 11, second night. I should have gone home. I should have signed over the case. Instead, I stayed. Something compels me, as if there is an answer hidden in Thomas's words, and if I can find it, I will understand this place. At 1:33 a.m., I heard it again. 3 knocks from inside my office closet. I stood frozen, watching the wooden door tremble slightly. When I opened it, nothing was inside but old coats and folders. I returned to the ward. Thomas was awake, standing by the window with his back to me. "Don't write about the knocks," he whispered before I spoke a word. "How do you know?" "They already know you heard them." Entry 12, Archive Discovery. The following afternoon I descended to the basement archives again. I needed to see more, to understand what had happened to the other Kerrigan. I found a separate drawer, unlabeled, shoved behind rusted filing cabinets. Inside were brittle pages of handwritten notes. No official letterhead, no signatures except one. S. Kerrigan. One page stopped me cold. Do not speak their names. Do not acknowledge them when they stand behind you. They will test you with the sound of your own voice. If you hear yourself speak and you did not speak, leave immediately. As I read, a faint echo drifted through the basement, my own voice calling softly from somewhere behind the shelves. "Dr. Kerrigan, Samuel, come here." I turned slowly, pulse hammering. The basement was empty, only shadows and stacks of old boxes. But the voice came again, closer, whispering from the dark. "Samuel, you're next." I stumbled backward, dropping the folder. The echo of my own name faded into the pipes above. Entry 13, breaking point. That night I confronted Thomas. What do they want? I demanded, standing in his doorway, fists clenched. He tilted his head, watching me with calm eyes. They want you to stop. They want silence. Every word you write is a wound to them. I don't believe you, I said, though my voice shook. You already do, he replied. The lights in the corridor flickered and dimmed. From somewhere deep in the hospital came a sound like dozens of knuckles rapping on hollow walls in perfect unison. Thomas stepped closer to the bars, his smile gone now, replaced by a grim seriousness. If you don't stop, he said softly, they'll show you what they showed me. My legs felt weak. For a long moment I couldn't move, couldn't even look away from his eyes. The knocking grew louder, filling the air, a rhythm that made the walls seem alive. Then all at once, silence. Entry 14, personal confession. I am writing this now with the full knowledge that I should not. The notes in the archives warned me. Thomas warned me. The scratching on the storage room wall warned me. But something inside me refuses to stop. If someone finds these pages later, know this. There are things inside these walls that do not belong to us. They have been here long before this hospital was built. They know our names, they know what we write, and they do not forgive. I hear footsteps in the hall outside my office, though the monitors show no movement. A shadow just passed my door, though no one was there. I think they are closer now. I can hear Thomas's voice, though I am alone. They're here, he whispers. They're standing right behind you. Entry 15, the third night. I no longer feel the passage of time in these halls. The nights bleed into one another. The staff have started to avoid me, their eyes lowering when I walk past. Perhaps they hear the whispers too, or perhaps they only sense the change in me. I stayed again. I could not bring myself to leave, not with Thomas here, not with so many unanswered questions. At 2:12 a.m., while the ward lay in darkness and the only sound was the groan of old pipes, I heard a door slam somewhere down the isolation wing. I rose, notebook in hand, and began to walk. Each step echoed too loudly. The light above room 3D flickered, then went dark. I paused, staring through the observation glass. Inside, the room was empty, as it has been for years. And yet in the faint moonlight through the barred window, I saw footprints in the dust, leading to the corner and stopping abruptly, as though the person who made them simply vanished. Behind me, the corridor stretched, and I heard breathing. Slow, deep, steady breathing that was not mine. I turned quickly. Empty hall. Entry 16, conversation at the door. I went to Thomas's room. He was awake, standing at the far wall, his forehead pressed to the cold concrete. They're moving, he said without turning. Thomas, look at me, I demanded. He turned, and his eyes were darker than I remembered, pupils wide, unblinking. They asked me a question last night, he whispered. They asked if I wanted them to stop you. My voice caught in my throat. What did you say? Thomas stepped toward me, his bare feet soundless on the floor. He lowered his voice to a near whisper. I said not yet. Entry 17, the voice in the walls. I left his room shaken. In the hallway, the knocking started again, slow and deliberate. 3 knocks, a pause, 3 knocks, a pause. Then, from the old ventilation duct above, I heard my own voice, clear and cold. Samuel, open the door. I froze. My hands trembled so violently I dropped the notebook. The voice came again, urgent now. Samuel, we need you. Open the door. I backed away slowly, heart pounding, until I reached the stairwell. The lights above me flickered, and in the dark between flickers I saw silhouettes, tall, thin figures standing at the end of the corridor, their heads tilted at impossible angles. When the light steadied, they were gone. Entry 18, archive connection. I returned to the basement later that day, driven by something I can't explain. The air was heavy with dust. I searched deeper into the files until I found an old cassette tape labeled Kerrigan S. 1974. I found an old player and pressed play. Static filled the room, then a trembling voice. My name, my voice, but older, strained. They've taken the others. They know I'm writing this. If anyone hears, don't. The tape cut off with a scream that was unmistakably mine. I dropped the player. My breath came in short gasps. My reflection in the dusty glass of the archive cabinet didn't move when I did. Entry 19, breaking the silence. That night, against every instinct, I confronted Thomas. "What do they want from me?" I shouted through the bars. Thomas smiled sadly. "They want you to join the others." "No," I said, stepping closer. "No, I'm not like the others." He shook his head. "You right, Doctor. You right, and you remember. That's enough." I gripped the bars, trying to steady myself. "How do I stop it?" Thomas looked toward the ceiling corner again, his eyes wide. "You don't," he whispered. Entry 20, final warning. I am writing this now in the dim light of my office, though I know they are watching. The knocking has not stopped for hours. It moves through the walls like a heartbeat. I saw the shadow again, tall, thin, standing in the corner of the room. When I turned fully to face it, it slid backward into the dark, leaving only the faint sound of my own voice whispering my name. Thomas is silent now. The orderlies say he hasn't spoken since midnight, only stares at the ceiling, lips moving silently. I don't know how much longer I can stay here. The record from 1974 is still open on my desk, the last line written in a hurried scrawl. If you are reading this, they already know you. I hear footsteps outside my door again. I hear the creak of the handle. The lights just went out. Entry 21, darkness. The blackout lasted no more than a few seconds, but in that moment the world shifted. The faint emergency lights buzzed on, casting the corridor in a deep red glow. The air smelled of rust and damp concrete. I stood motionless in my office, pen still in hand, listening. Slow footsteps moved past my door, slow, deliberate, as if whoever walked there dragged their feet across the tile. I stepped back from the glass window in the door, heart hammering. A shadow paused on the other side, its outline long and crooked. "Samuel," the voice whispered, the same tone as mine, the same cadence. I didn't answer. I pressed my back against the wall, feeling the cold seeping through my coat. The shadow moved on, vanishing into the red-lit corridor. Entry 22, return to Thomas. I forced myself to walk back to Isolation Ward 3. The emergency lights flickered as I approached, their weak glow making every corner seem deeper, darker. Thomas sat on his bed, staring at his hands. His lips no longer moved. "Thomas," I said softly, stepping closer to the bars. He slowly raised his head. His eyes looked empty now, as if the life had drained from them. "They asked again," he whispered. "What did you tell them?" "I told them, yes." My throat went dry. "Yes to what?" "To show you," murmured. Entry 23, the hallway. The corridor behind me groaned. A metallic scraping echoed down its length, growing louder with each second. I turned. The red lights dimmed, flickered, and then the far end of the hall plunged into shadow. Out of that darkness came a sound like dozens of fingernails dragging along the walls, slow and deliberate. A figure emerged, tall, thin, its limbs too long, moving with an unnatural rhythm. Its head tilted, jerking slightly as though listening. I stepped back until my shoulders hit the bars of Thomas's room. He remained seated, watching, his face expressionless. The figure stopped halfway down the corridor. Another figure stepped out from the opposite side, then another, until the hall was filled with them, silent, unmoving, their heads all tilting toward me in unison. Entry 24, the whisper. "Samuel," they said together, in my own layered and multiplied, echoing off the walls. "Write no more." I felt my knees weaken. I wanted to speak, to beg, to demand answers, but my mouth would not move. The pen slipped from my fingers and clattered to the floor. Thomas's voice broke through the chorus. "You shouldn't have stayed." Entry 25, the approach. The figures began to move, gliding toward me with jerking steps, their limbs scraping against the walls. The knocking started again, louder now, faster, a rhythm that made the lights flicker violently. I stumbled backward, my hands searching for the door handle of Thomas's room. His eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time I saw fear in them. "They're here," he whispered. "They're real." The nearest figure stopped just a few feet from me. Its head tilted back, and from the hollow darkness where its face should have been came a sound like my own scream. Entry 26, escape. I tore the keys from my pocket and fumbled with the lock. The metal scraped, my hands shook, and behind me the chorus of voices grew louder. "Samuel! Samuel!" The lock turned. I shoved the door open and staggered inside, slamming it shut behind me. Thomas didn't move. He sat perfectly still as though carved from stone. The pounding began immediately. Hands, claws, something striking the steel door in rapid, violent bursts. The walls trembled. Dust rained down from the ceiling. "Make them stop," I shouted. Thomas only shook his head slowly. "You opened the wrong door." Entry 27. Final entry. The lights are failing again. The pounding has not stopped. My hands are numb, my chest tight, but I keep writing, because if I stop, I feel they will take me as they took the other Kerrigan. Thomas is no longer speaking. He stares past me, eyes fixed on the corner of the room, his lips moving in silent prayer. I hear them whispering now, right behind me, their breath cold on my neck. They repeat my name, over and over, their voices overlapping until they merge into a single deafening sound. The door is bending inward. Metal groans. I will write until they come through. I will write until they take the pen from my hand. I can hear them inside the walls. I can feel their fingers on my shoulder.